The next few slides I won't dwell on too much, but it gives you an idea of the drawings of the time of various surgical interventions. And of course, in order to perform those type of operations, you needed the surgical instruments. And this is a range of surgical instruments from the period. And I'm sure if you looked at modern surgical instruments, some of them would look very similar. Continuing with the barbers stroke barber surgeons, it was often indistinguishable even with the inventory records. They certainly weren't as well educated as surgeons, but often acted as surgeons for poorer residents, as I said previously. There is some evidence of apprentices having qualified as a tonsor, later claiming freedom as a surgeon. There was one particular man, William Chambers Sr. He was a barber, and in 1704 he was granted a license by the Archbishop of York to practice surgery. Some of his apprentices qualified as barbers, barber surgeons, and apothecary surgeons. His youngest son, John, qualified as an apothecary, and William Jr. as a barber surgeon. William Jr. then studied at Leiden University, gained a Master of Doctoring and an extra licentiate from the Royal College of Physicians in London in 1724. By the late 18th century, another descendant, William Chambers Darling, he was a physician and was subsequently knighted. So within less than 100 years, that family had moved from poor barbers to knights of the realm. The hull grocers were a disparate group of people selling herbs and spices, possibly some crude medicines. What we don't know is whether they ever gave advice on medical matters. They possibly did to their friends and the poorer citizens. Could we describe them as apothecaries? Certainly not. With several local examples, and in their inventories we have all kinds of products being described: tobacco, sugar, brandy, hops, vinegar, strong waters, Spanish juices, black pepper, indigo, pimenta, ginger, rape oil, niger, crocuses, all of which may have been used by the poorer citizens to help manage certain symptoms of disease. Of the groups of medical practitioners that we've covered, from a professional point of view, clearly physicians were at the top of the tree, probably followed by the surgeons, eventually midwives, but apothecaries were both professionally qualified but very successful locally. Many of them went on to be chamberlains, sheriff or mayor of the town. They were reasonably wealthy from the values in their probate inventories. One or two grocers for sure were very successful in local politics. They often became very wealthy as a result of their business undertakings. Again, surgeons, like the physicians, were relatively few in number, so it's probably difficult to find people who had achieved a position locally. They tended, I guess, to be low, the physicians and apothecaries, in status, particularly on the political aspect. And midwives, even professionally, were not regulated until much later. Utilising probate inventories and any wills that have survived, this slide gives some idea of value and wealth. Robert Ganton, the physician, as we've said, left £400 to his wife, plus several houses in High Street, and he was only 38 when he passed away. So he's definitely a man with high social standing and not an insignificant amount of wealth, remembering that £100 then was worth around about, or is worth around about £20,000 today. So just what he left his wife was substantial. William Watson, the apothecary and surgeon, was only 26 when he died, and he was an apprentice of Robert Ganton's. £176 he was worth in terms of his personal possessions. The apothecary surgeon, Tobias Donkin, again, reasonably wealthy, £164 worth, plus a house in High Street and a manor house at Swine in Holderness. Whereas the barbers tended to be of less wealth, lower rankings in local society. The grocers, however, had a widespread, and clearly Caleb Jedney at £55 and Abraham Nelson at values at £276 were certainly not as poor as the barbers, and in fact in Abraham Nelson's case he was wealthier than William Watson and Tobias Donkin. So, as in everything in life, some people are more successful in their business than others. This slide utilises the work of local historian Robert Bernard and his work on High Street in Hull, and basically is showing you how just on the one street, albeit the main street in the town at the time, the apothecaries, the barbers and other surgeons were owners or tenants of several of the bigger properties in that High Street. I hope you've gained from this talk an insight into the medical problems, the health problems in early modern English towns, and in particular Kingston upon Hull, and also something about the medics who existed in the late 17th century, and particularly those working and living in Hull around 1700. Many thanks.